This morning, U.S. and Russian experts are working on details to dismantle and destroy 1,000 tons of chemical weapons in Syria.
Syrian President Bashar Assad says he'll surrender the weapons not because of U.S. airstrike threats, but because of an offer from Russian President Vladimir Putin.
But Washington remains skeptical that such a deal can be verified. As Assad insists he did not unleash poison gas on his own people, President Obama says the evidence is clear.
Monitoring the Syria situation closely are Ohio's two senators, Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown, who will join us from Washington.
And we'll also have Central Ohio congressional reaction.
I was a little disappointed that he didn't focus enough on the way forward.
Congressman Steve Stivers will join us in our studio.
Plus, Jack Dory from the Columbus Dispatch offers insight from Washington.
All coming up on Capitol Square.
Good morning and welcome to Capitol Square. I'm Tracy Townsend.
Hi everybody, I'm Jim Heath. Our nation seemed to be on a brink of a military strike against Syria the same time last week, but the president since asked Congress to delay a vote, even as he spoke to the American people and made a case for a limited attack.
I will not put American boots on the ground in Syria. I will not pursue an open-ended action like Iraq or Afghanistan. I will not pursue a prolonged air campaign like Libya or Kosovo. This would be a targeted strike to achieve a clear objective: deterring the use of chemical weapons and degrading Assad's capabilities.
One of the most surprising allies of President Obama's in his push for this military strike is House Speaker John Boehner. The speaker is in a minority of his own party pushing a military response. Here's what he said about it earlier this week.
I've supported every president that I've served under for the last 23 years when it comes to the use of military force. There's one person who speaks for the United States of America when it comes to foreign policy, and that's the President of the United States.
And joining us this morning from Washington, D.C. to discuss the latest on Syria, Ohio's U.S. Senators Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown.
And good morning to you both. Senator Portman, let's begin with you. You served in the Bush administration at a time that Americans were growing, I think we can say, increasingly skeptical about our involvement in Iraq. Yet the Bush team strongly believed that Saddam Hussein had to be dealt with because of weapons of mass destruction. In Syria, we have yet another dictator who's been accused now of using biological weapons on his own people. So I guess the question this morning is, why do Republicans now feel that that does not warrant U.S. military action?
Well, I think most Republicans think there ought to be an international response. And I think that if you look at the coalition that was built for Iraq, I think it at one point was 30 or 40 countries. We don't have that, certainly with regard to Syria. We haven't been convinced by the president that there is a broader strategy here, which, you know, with regard to Iraq, you're right, people thought there were weapons of mass destruction, not just the United States, but of course other countries did as well, including, and the United Nations did as well. But we had a strategy, and you could disagree with that strategy, but it was clear what the objective was. Here it's not clear. We're apparently looking, with regard to this military strike, at deterring the use of chemical weapons, but it's not clear that would be achieved, one, and two, what if, in fact, there were a strike and then more chemical weapons were used? Are we trying to topple Assad? Are we trying to get him to the bargaining table? Are we trying to deal a blow to him relative to the opposition? The one thing that I thought was interesting about the resolution that we were asked to support is it said, strike now, strategy later. It said within 30 days there had to be a strategy. And my view, as you know, is that we ought to have a strategy first. So it was partly because I didn't see the international effort and the international support, and partly because I just don't see the strategy here to justify this. I do believe there should be an international response, and I'm hopeful that this proposal we're now seeing working through the United Nations will be successful.
Speaker John Boehner has been very firm this week on his view that only the commander-in-chief can speak for the country on foreign policy. This lack of support from Congress for the president, isn't it setting a dangerous partisan precedent for the future? Well,
I think it's sad, honestly, Tracy, that you don't see the support on really either side of the aisle that you would hope to see when a president lays out a specific proposal, but it's because of the lack of a strategy, in my view. I think there's been a failure to communicate clearly what the objectives are and why this particular military strike would be part of achieving that objective. And so, you know, when the president's got a good plan, of course you ought to be with him, and I have been and will be. But when you just can't see how this is going to help in terms of our national security interests, and you think there are some other alternatives, including this diplomatic route that's now being considered, which is to try to get the international community to tell Syria, turn over these weapons, allow the inspectors in, and over time destroy these weapons, you know, that seems to be, frankly, much more useful toward whatever your strategy is, rather than a bombing campaign, which would be, as the president said, very short-lived, and even John Kerry said unbelievably small. And the question is, what impact is that really going to have on both keeping him from using those weapons again, but also ensuring that that stockpile does not get into the hands of non-state actors, terrorist groups, Hezbollah and others, which would create even more of a national security risk to us.
What if this Russian deal with Syria cannot be verified? And 30 days from now, we simply find ourselves back at the exact same place as we were last week. Do you see any resolution that includes a military strike as the president is requesting?
This is, you know, an ongoing diplomatic effort now. Let's see how that works out, and then let's see what is necessary. But I certainly don't think that the United States going in on a military strike now, without a strategy, without the international community, without the international support, is going to be effective. And I think the American people, frankly, have seen that. So it's not just that we're war weary. We are. It's that we also, as Ohioans and as Americans, look at this and don't see that it achieves the objectives and that you would want to achieve in terms of our national security.
Senator Rob Portman, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate you. Thanks, Jim.
All right, joining us now also from Washington, D.C., Senator Sherrod Brown.
And Senator, you and other Democrats have been highly skeptical of the president's plan on Syria. Why has he failed to convince you and especially your Democratic colleagues that military action is necessary?
I think the public is, first of all, war weary and wary of war, both. I think that what happened 10 years ago with Iraq still makes people more suspicious of a government that betrayed them back then. And I also think that the use of military force, it's not clear what the outcome is here, but there's some optimism this week because of the proposal from the Russians. I mean, it's trust but verify, but it's I believe that it's in the Russians' interest and the Iranians' interest that Syria be rid of these chemical weapons, because they at some point can be turned on them if it's a different government, if the Assad government falls. So I think this potential UN resolution is worth pursuing. Just put a hold on what we're doing here now and the threat of force, and we'll see a week or two from now where this goes.
Senator, there was some confusion with the president's address this week. On one hand, he explained that Assad had gassed his own people and he needed to be held accountable with a military strike. Then he kind of shifted gears and he said if Assad handed over his chemical weapons now to Russia, he wouldn't be held accountable for that previous attack. It sounds almost like a scenario where a leader says if you turn over your gun after you shoot someone, it's okay. Is that the type of precedent that we want to set here?
Well, I think when you look at the world's appetite for going into Syria, and the world nor the American people have much of an appetite for doing this. If you read polls, if you see you see what happened in the British Parliament, you see how other governments have responded. So this isn't just easy to say, yeah, let's go punish Assad. Everybody's unhappy, everybody's outraged, morally and otherwise, with what he did. The first goal is to stop him from doing it again, and getting these chemical weapons away from him is the most important thing now, because an attack on Assad, a military attack, won't necessarily stop him from doing it again. So I think you start with that, and the punishment for this dictator that did the most terrible thing imaginable comes down the road at some point. But if we can find a way with the Russians' help, and it's trust but verify with the Russians, it has been for decades, if we can find a way with the Russians' help to eliminate these chemical weapons, I think that's a huge victory for humankind, especially in the Middle East, but for all of us.
And Senator, you're a progressive Democrat who won election in 2006, due largely to Iraq fatigue in our state. And now President Obama is asking for your support to target Syria militarily. What will you say to him in 30 days if that Russia deal cannot be verified and we find ourselves really in the same position?
I don't know. I can't guess what if 30 days from now. I mean, it's possible one scenario if the Russians go against their word, break their word from what they're saying now. There's very much a likelihood, certainly a possibility, if not a likelihood, that other countries will rally around us to do what we need to do there. That would make it a different. That would make me more likely to support something, and I think it would make the American people more likely. But the people are sick of what happened, and the people felt betrayed from 10 years ago. I had a 30-minute conversation one-on-one with the president this week, and I'm still leaning against giving him this authorize the use of force. 2 weeks from now, we'll see where things are. As of now, though, the potential UN deal could make a huge difference, and I want to give that a full chance to work. Trust but verify with the Russians, but give it a full chance to work.
Senator Sherrod Brown joining us from Washington this morning. As always, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Up next, Central Ohio's congressional delegation weighs in on what to do in Syria. Congressman Steve Stivers joins us here in the studio.
Yeah, and don't forget to jump in on the conversation on our Capitol Square Facebook page. There we also have some behind-the-scenes pictures of our guests on the show. You can also follow Tracy and I on Twitter and on our website, 10tv.com/Capitol Square. We'll be right back.